The May 3rd, 2022 regular meeting of the West Haven ARPA Committee will now come to order. Will each member, paid professional, and city employee state their name for the record? Ken Carney.
Doug Coulter.
David Grudberg.
Dwight Knowles.
Gary Perda.
Ken Ferris.
Mike Last.
Iris Diaz.
Chris Barstein.
Rohan Smith.
Rick Spryer.
Each member has received a copy of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any proposed changes? If none, the agenda stands. I'm going to ask our secretary to paraphrase the April 5th, 2022 regular meeting minutes.
Tuesday, April 5th, 2022, 5:53 p.m. Call to order. Present Ken, Mike, Dwight, Chris, Rohan, Gary. Absent Iris, Neil, Ken Ferris. In attendance, David. Approval of agenda for April 5th. Approved. Approval for meeting minutes. Approved. Chairman's report. Review of Cohen Resnick's audit report and its many deficiencies. Introduction of Mr. David T. Goldberg, attorney. Revised RFQ for architectural firm. SCROCOG on-call services. ARPA accounting firm RFQ. Review of mayor's plan to council. No new business. Motion to adjourn at 6:58 p.m.
Are there any proposed changes to the minutes? Okay, I have one. We have a misspelling on David's name. It's right there.
Okay.
Okay. Make that change.
Yeah, here's twice, it's just GRUD.
And Dwight, I'm going to ask you to pass those minutes on to the city clerk after you revise and sign them, okay?
Okay.
Okay, next move on to chairman's report, the accounting RFQ.
You want to move the minutes?
Oh, I need to approve the minutes, my apologies.
There you go.
I'll move the minutes to be approved.
Do I have a second?
As amended.
There you go.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks, Mike. All right, moving on to chairman's report, accounting RFQ. So as you guys know, this is kind of like a three-legged stool. We've got the committee, we've got the legal team, and we've got the accounting team. The accounting team has gone out to bid. We expect those to come back to us on May 9th. And the hope is that we are able to choose a accounting firm who will attend these meetings with us and help us through this process. Okay, any questions on that?
Ken, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
First of all, it's May 16th, the date was changed.
Okay.
And a couple of firms have asked if it's okay to attend meetings virtually, because a couple of firms in New York have inquired about.
My opinion, and I'll ask the committee, is that if they're gonna work with us the way we want them to, they would need to be here in person. Would you guys agree with that?
I would agree.
Yeah, we don't want, Zoom, yeah. So May 16th, we're gonna open that up. On May 16th, we'll receive the bids and we'll open them up and then we'll present them to the committee. Any questions on the RFQ for the accountant? Anybody? All right, moving on. In your booklet, I've included a guide to the purchasing ordinance. Now, let me tell you a little background on this. 15 years ago, I was a member of the Building Oversight Committee. And I asked, how do we spend money in this town? What are the rules? And I never really got a straight answer. And when you pushed hard, you would hear things like, there's some information in the charter, there's some information in this other book, there's an amendment from the council over here. So I did a deep dive. I worked with, at the time, Corporation Counsel Peter Barrett, and I put this packet together to describe how things go out to bid. It was blessed by Peter Barrett after he made a few changes, and this is what I've been following over the years. There may have been a few subtle changes by the council, but basically the way this works is no organization within the city, no mayor, no superintendent, certainly not this committee, has the right or the authority to choose any vendor. Vendors go out to bid through the purchasing ordinance, very strict rules. They end up in the lap of the purchasing agent, and the purchasing agent takes our recommendation and makes sure that it's the lowest responsible bidder. And the purchasing agent has the ability to change that recommendation as long as he or she follows the rules. So when I hear things like, we're gonna pick somebody, that's just completely untrue, okay? Every dollar that is spent in public funds has to go out to bid through these rules. Now, over the years, I've seen people challenge that, and I hear things like, well, we had money donated to us. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if the money's donated. It's still for public use, it has to go out to bid. I hear things like, well, we're gonna hire a consultant. We don't have to go out to bid. Not true. Any consultant you hire has to go through the bidding process, okay? It even works in reverse. We've had excess material when we remodel schools, and I hear things like, well, you know, my brother's cousin could use that for his restaurant. No, it has to go out to bid. Literally, excess material has to go out to bid and be advertised for someone to take it. You can't just take the material. There are organizations that want to service the Board of Ed, for example, to help kids. It has to go out to bid. You can't just pick somebody and say, he's my buddy, or I met him somewhere, or her, and I want to have them team with these kids. If there's a service the Board of Ed or the city wants, it has to go out to bid. Even if there's no money exchange, it has to go out to bid. You can't just hire somebody that you like, or you know. So this guide, if you will, discusses in detail how that process works. And I want everybody to know that that is the process that I expect to work on this committee. And it's a process that I've used in all the volunteer work that I've done with the city. Now, there are some exceptions to bid, okay? The first one is legal. Corporation counsel can hire an attorney without going out to bid, okay? Second one is sole source provider. An example of that might be the UI. Let's say you want to put a night light program in. There's nobody else doing it with the UI. That's an exception. Cooperative purchasing is an exception to going out to bid. That's when you go to the state bid list, or you team up with other state-run organizations to make a purchase. And the last one is an emergency purchase, which nobody wants to do, where you still need to go back and explain yourself to the council and get their sign-off after you've made the purchase. But even following those rules where you don't have to go out to bid, it's still part of the purchasing ordinance. It's part of the rules. You've met the requirements of the purchasing ordinance. So I just wanted to bring that up because I'm hearing a lot of things about someone's gonna pick a contractor. We don't have that authority. We don't sign checks. We don't sign contracts. All we do is facilitate the plan as dictated to us by the council using the rules of the purchasing ordinance. That's how we do it. Does anybody have any questions on that? Anybody? Rick, do you want to add to that at all, or?
There is a sentence.
Okay. Okay, so moving on here, we have the council resolutions. Let's go through those. So as everyone here is aware, the mayor sent a comprehensive plan to the city council. The council's job is to approve, deny, or change that plan, send it to us, and we make it happen. The first resolution is for $250,000 for, hello, Mr. Chairman, you would sit over there? Yeah. The first resolution is for $250,000 for sidewalks. Now, as you read this resolution, it talks about going out to bid, getting 3 bids, and then going back to the council. As it turns out, the city of West Haven puts sidewalks out to bid every year. And this year, we have a low bidder who is about 40% less than everybody else. Is it in the package here? Did I put it in there?
It's in
Okay.
the binder.
Oh, here it is, yeah. So go to page 11. Elm City Materials already has the bid for sidewalks for the city of West Haven. The second lowest bid that I saw when this went out, and I didn't put this bid out, Ernie, the sidewalk inspector, did. It was an advertised bid. For the same work was over $1 million. So my point is that if we go back out to bid and we get 3 bids, we will have far less work done as opposed to using the bid that the city already has for sidewalks. That bid is based on a lot of volume, much more volume than we're allowed to spend under this ARPA plan, and we need to take advantage of that and do a lot more sidewalks for less money. Okay, so I don't know, I guess I'll ask the attorney, if I have a resolution from the council that says go out to bid for sidewalks, I guess I have to go back to the council and tell them we already have a bid.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think the existence of a contract which is, well, a bid, I guess, which is just phrased in terms of bulk work to be done. I don't know how that normally proceeds and whether the work that's proposed to be done under this $250,000 resolution would be included in that, but I would expect if the Elm City Materials was the successful bidder, and then there was an additional RFP put out for sidewalk work, that the city would hear about it. And
Correct.
then that the prevailing low bidder would not be too pleased about that. I should note, in terms of relative bids, it looks like the next low bid was about $750,000. There was one for over $1 million, but at
Okay.
page 13 looks like.
Oh, I put them all in here, okay, yep.
750, but.
There it is, yep.
I
And
I think, at minimum, I think it's a fair question to be raised that, hey, we've accepted a bid that provides for X amount of work to be done, including sidewalks, between November 2021 and October of 2022. And there's, at minimum, some confusion about how that interrelates to this proposal to spend $250,000 separately. So, I don't know how the best way to put that to the city council, I guess, is, but I definitely think it's a concern that ought to be raised.
All right, so I've been invited to the council on the 9th at 5 o'clock. If anybody here wants to attend that meeting, you could. And at that meeting, I'm gonna ask the council to relieve us of this ordinance of 3 bids in the interest of using a lesser expensive contractor. Question?
Well, as the manager of the funds that pays for most of the sidewalks, which are state, local capital improvement funds, I can say that this bid meets all the tests that the state of Connecticut puts on us to publicly bid and manage this. And it was done at a time when the prices were lower than they are today. And I don't think, in the current environment, and our purchasing agent could also speak to this, everything we're bidding is coming in 30–40% over what we expected it to. So if we already have 4 prices, and they're at last year's prices, and they're in a contract to deliver it, we don't have a volume in this contract. It's whatever sidewalks we do, whether it's $250,000 or $400,000, depends on the amount of money we get each year. We didn't commit to an amount, so it's open-ended for us. It's a win-win-win. Seems to me the council would understand that if we go out to bid, it may come in way higher than this unit price. So,
Good,
I
Mike.
think we should
You
do
know, I
it.
was just gonna say, if you're gonna go before the city council on May 9th, I think it might be a good idea just to let the council have a copy of the bids that have already been put out, that there has been a competitive process, and there is a current contract in place, that we could use to expedite the projects too.
Okay, I think that's the plan then. All right, so this, yes, sir.
I'm gonna make sure with Elm City, just for transparency, it goes by Layden. If you hear the name Layden, that's what
Right, yeah, yeah.
called, that their DBA. That these values, this 20,000 square foot, isn't their max number. And, it's a bid number, and it's a number that we put on there for,
Comparison purposes, right?
Here's what
Yeah.
we're thinking we're going to do, but I just need to make sure that they're aware that, the numbers are going crazy. So, I will have that information
All right.
Is Elm City and William Layton the same family?
tomorrow. No, I don't know if they're the same, I think they're the same family, yeah, but
They're not the same company.
not the same company, but the same family, yes.
So,
They kind of broke off from one another.
One union, one non-union?
That I don't, but I don't have a lot of info.
Well, I'd looked up Elm City and I saw that the ownership was Layden as well, and
Yeah.
I noticed the building.
Layden Industries is related to Elm City Materials, and William Layden is a separate company.
But
But I don't know.
at the end of the day, Elm City Materials has the low bid for the
Correct.
city sidewalks.
Yes.
Right, okay. All right, so with that, if we read how this money should be spent, the way I read it is it's specific to city-owned properties, which would include schools, for new sidewalks that don't exist. Is that what everybody reads this?
Well, so, just a little background. This plan that the mayor came up with is intended to be conceptual, and much work needs to be done once there's an agreement, at least at the council level, on what projects should move forward and at what price. So this was never intended to be a working plan. That was intended to happen here. So when we wrote this, we were looking for equity in pedestrian access and to promote walking to school. And the words in here are crafted around that element. So whatever meets that test to promote equity around schools, child pedestrian safety around schools, however that works, fits the model and would be appropriate spending under the ARPA plan.
All right, so with that, we sent out a email to all the administrators of the schools. We asked them to identify sidewalks that do not exist, that need to be installed to assist with kids walking to school, okay? And what we found is when you install these sidewalks, I had Ernie go out and visit all these locations. When you install these sidewalks, codes start to trigger, and one of those is access for ADA. So we've included not just the installation of new sidewalks at these locations, but going to the nearest corner and creating an ADA access. And I spoke about that with our attorney, and he felt that that would fall under this description. There's no sense putting in a sidewalk that doesn't meet code. However, that ADA access is not on city property. It's usually at the end of the street at a different block. So if we go with that plan, here's what we came up with. Can you pass those down? Sure. You sure? Now, this resolution came to me in writing less than a week ago. We weren't able to, they weren't able to get to the parks. But if we hit the schools, we're looking at roughly $120,000 with the waste factor. And we think the parks will fill in more of the money that's available, but we don't think we're gonna reach $250,000 if we follow it to the exact rule that it reads. Now, if you're telling me we can replace some sidewalks, then we can hit 250, no problem. But right now, with new sidewalks, we're gonna be under 250.
Well, if it promotes walking to school and reduces reliance on buses and cars, and it provides an equity, so that means that reaching out to communities that are not able to walk to school at the current moment, if we are hitting those points, then I think you satisfied the intent.
Okay.
Ken, this is based on the bid of $9.65.
It was based on the Elm
okay.
City, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I feel good about it because the administrators are the ones that know where the needs are. I think they're the best people to tell us where the sidewalk should go. I don't know if you heard, but we had an incident over at McCrill where a crossing guard actually got hit by a car. The sidewalk we're proposing there will help that from happening again, keep that from happening again, we hope. Okay. All right, so any questions on the sidewalk resolution?
Do you have any idea, once you go to the city council and if they allow the prior competitive process to go forward, do you have any idea what the time frame of this would be to
Well,
get it completed?
I mean, the way it should work, I think, is we've gotten input from the administrators. We have a bid that is, done properly through the purchasing ordinance. It's less than what we could buy sidewalks for today because of the age of the bid and the fact that it's based on much greater volume. I think what should really happen is the committee should pass a motion to approve this, but I think with this resolution, we can't do that. So I'd have to go back to the city council on the 9th, explain this to them. And then our next meeting isn't until, June, unless I call a special meeting. So I think it sits in limbo right now. All right, moving on. Any other questions on that resolution? All right, move on to the vac truck. So, unless the majority of people on this committee tell me differently, I think as these resolutions come to us, we need to get the end users involved, the people who actually are gonna use the equipment. That's sort of the plan that I'm following. With that, we have spoken to the people that would be using the actual vehicle, and we have come up with a spec for the vac truck. Okay. One more. So the council has allocated $487,000 for the truck. My understanding is we can achieve that purchase, we can meet the spec and achieve that with the $487,000. This spec is what represents the needs of the city and the water pollution control plant. And my understanding is that by purchasing this truck, the operations cost goes down considerably, because right now they're relying on a third-party vendor to do this work where they can now do it in-house. So I'd like a motion to put these specs out to bid.
I'll
For
move
the vac truck?
the motion that we
Okay.
put the specs out to bid for the vac truck.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Anybody? Go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, I'm thinking this is gonna be a custom vehicle. Do we have any idea what kind of time frame we're looking at? Because, I could see something like this, once it goes out to bid and we put a purchase order out, it could take up to a year to get it.
In normal market, 8 months.
Yeah.
But it's in abnormal market, like they said. manufacturers.
I'm hearing a year, Mike.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, and I guess that's where I'm concerned, not only on this, but all the other items that are gonna get approved. We may run out of time.
Well, if we're in contract and we've committed the funds, we'll be able to do it before the end of 2024.
Okay.
So I think we'll make that deadline for the legal expenditure of funds. But obviously, I think
Okay.
that Mr. Spryer needs to get some solid commitments. Now, having just been a fire truck for Allington, what you get promised in the bid and what ends up in the contract are about 4 or 5 months apart, you know, and they've got all sorts of reasons why that happens. So I think we're wise to think that it's a year, maybe a year and a half, and if it comes in sooner, we'll be pleasantly surprised.
Any other discussion?
One question.
Yes, sir.
I know we're, really thinking that this purchase of a vehicle, but my thought was wouldn't it be more beneficial if we put this out for another company to handle? I've been here 40 years, and we have a sweeper that is never around. It's been broken most of the time I've been here in 40 years.
So let me, all right, I'll let Doug answer that, but before we do, so our job is not to change what the council gives us, right? Our job is to make it what happens, okay?
But it's gonna be a waste.
But that's an opinion that you may have, but it doesn't change what the
It's a
council directs us to do.
fact. It's gonna be a
Go ahead,
fact.
what do you got?
Well, that did come up in discussions with the sewer commission staff. And what they informed us was, when there's a call for this truck, they're sending their own staff people out, especially if it's a night call. And they have 3 people standing there watching the contractor do the work. And those 3 people would now be operating the truck. And
Okay.
I guess this is something to do with union rules.
Once it
And-
breaks down,
And the union has agreed,
and you don't have the truck to do the work, getting the parts, people being out sick, when you're using a contractor, he has to perform.
The analysis that was done by several users is that the operational expense will go down. They've allowed for changing parts in the truck, servicing the truck, so on and so forth.
What about insurance and all the other things?
Well, it falls under the city's insurance. You're not paying the overhead, you're not paying the profit, you're not paying the general conditions. With the amount of, sewer work we have to do around here, and don't forget, there's money in ARPA, we think, coming to us to clean sewer lines. And, this truck will do that.
so one of the things to keep in mind, they did give us a number of 60,000 in cash outlay savings annually by not using a third-party contractor. But also, that's only 50% of the use of the truck. So we're actually gonna be doing 50% more work by doing storm sewers for the city. Sewer Commission will be cleaning storm sewers that right now we don't clean. And so one of the major complaints from the consumers, or the voters, taxpayers, citizens, has been consistently, as the chairman will tell you, stormwater, localized flooding. Our infrastructure is very old, wasn't designed for current rainfalls, and the low-hanging fruit that we can do is to maintain the existing lines. We don't own the equipment to do that. We don't have a budget to hire contractors to do that. So not only would it be saving the sewer commission by not having to hire a third party, but now we have the truck the other half of the time to start addressing some of those storm sewer issues. So that was the rationale behind owning it.
I still stay at home work.
When I do large condo work, we have to rent a lift, right? And we find out that if it's a 2 or 3 or 4 year project, buying the lift is far cheaper than renting it every month. And that's kind of what this is. This is a long-term investment over many years that's going to reduce operating costs and clean these sewer lines and reduce some of this flooding that's going on. I think it's a good play.
Your questions are absolutely correct. And these were the same questions that were asked of the staff by numerous people. So you're dead on. But I think in the long run, the analysis came down to buying a 20-year asset was the best use of these funds. Whereas if we just hired a contractor for 400,000, we'd only get a couple of years' worth of cleaning out of it. So that's the analysis.
Any other discussion, anyone? Go ahead, sir.
Did anyone thought about actually leasing the vehicle instead of outright buying the vehicle, and what would be the cost? Has anyone done like an analysis of how much it would cost to lease the vehicle? Because if you outright buy the truck and you have mechanical issue, you continually gotta fix it, right? But if you lease it, you could actually, every couple of years, you could upgrade.
So leasing on the municipal side is just another word for a car loan. You're stuck with it for the contract term. The contract term is the total cost of the vehicle that the leasing company paid, and at the end, you're buying it for $1. And it turns out to be very expensive interest, way more than we could just borrow at a bank or through bonding. So, except for some certain circumstances, it's not the same as a private industry or a private homeowner would be able to take advantage of such a thing. The leasing company would be making all the money in our assessment.
Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, I recognize that it's not our province to determine, what being done with the money
Sure.
is, that we're, fulfilling a fiduciary responsibility as to how it's spent. When I look at this bid, or the specifications, my inference is that, this isn't something that was put together by the end user based upon the capacity that they needed. This is the specification for a particular truck from a particular manufacturer.
Yeah.
So when we send this out to bid, if somebody's tank is 74 feet instead of 75 feet, I would hope that we're not holding anyone to this tight specification.
No, not at all.
And-
In fact, the end of the bid's gonna read, a big page with lines that says, do your changes, and then we'll evaluate what the best option is.
Okay.
They had to start somewhere.
Yep.
Here's the thing. Not a lot of companies offer this truck, number one. We had to get input from 5 or 6 different people, okay? But you're absolutely correct. When this goes out to bid, vendors who bid on it will have the opportunity to make changes, and they will not be disqualified for that, just the opposite.
Now, one other question, do we have, I just took a few minutes today, I don't know where I found them, but I did. There's a lot of used trucks out there with low hours and miles on it. Is that something we should investigate to come in lower? Actually seeing some in the $200,000 range.
So there's a couple things in that. Number one, you don't get the warranty that you get in a new truck. And number two, we literally have to spend $29 million by the deadline. This isn't coming from, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's
Yep.
not, if you're using, bonded money, you might think twice about it, but this is ARPA money.
Money's there, so it
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else in discussion? All in favor of the motion to put this out to bid, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we go to the food bank. I have asked Doug to come in and sort of present this one to you and talk about the intent and what we have to do here. Go ahead, Doug.
Okay, so our volunteer and charitable organizations in town who serve the needs of the public are the intended audience for these funds. And there's a number of different groups. Some of them work under an ecumenical religious umbrella group. Others are part of what's known as the Dream Center Project. The options to us when we were interviewing people on how best to spend money on food bank support were a myriad of things, from buying buildings to buying trucks to building walk-in coolers and just outright buying food. And we really didn't feel at this level that we could decide what was best for the community. And so we left it very general and very loose, that we would put out an appeal to the nonprofits and say, give us your best proposal, and then we'll parcel out the money. So apparently some of that was done on the council side, and they wanted to influence how that was parceled out, but I think we're still in the position of having to go to the community asking for proposals. It's just that now we need to define it a little more based on what the council thinks the money should be split up by.
So are you envisioning a application process?
Yes, so I would do it similar to a request for proposals for a bid. It would be an outreach to the nonprofits. You know, here's the parameters, here's the money available. Give us your best proposals, and then this committee would review them and make a recommendation.
And these are West Haven entities, correct?
Well, I think the council intends that these be West Haven entities. The mayor's original language was designed for anybody serving West Haven. But I think there's plenty of West Haven-based entities serving West Haven that we can certainly fund them all.
Is your office able to put together an application that we could review?
Yes.
Okay. So if it's gonna be West Haven, Ricky, I would donate the West Haven Voice to advertise this very important RFP.
But we're not quite following a purchasing ordinance because it's not a purchase. This is gonna be a grant to a subrecipient. So we're
Still need
not,
to publicly make
Yeah.
it aware.
right.
Yeah.
So I,
Just need to just make it a legal notice.
Yeah.
publicly making it aware.
I understand the council's intent of asking for 3 bids, but it's not like 3 competitive bids from nonprofits and we're gonna choose the lowest bid. I mean, that's not really how it's gonna work.
No, but you're gonna get multiple applications. We wanna move this as quickly as possible. We'll review the applications and make a recommendation.
Yes. I think that the biggest concern for this committee is gonna be reviewing the way that the money's given out. So ideally, it would be reimbursement. Mr. Nonprofit, you go spend the money, come back and show us what you did, and we'll reimburse you. They may not have the capacity for that. So if you're a nonprofit and you need a walk-in cooler, we may have to fund that walk-in cooler, but we may want to be very involved in how they bid it, who installs it, who's inspecting it, was it permitted, inspected, all that sort of thing. So I think this committee will have a great deal of hand-holding on how that goes. If they're actually outright purchasing food, what's the sustainability of that program? What happens when this money runs out? You know, are we better off enabling an organization instead of just funding food for a year? I mean, these are the decisions I see being made.
When I've seen these sort of things happen over the last 20 years, I always question, is the organization a real organization? And I think whatever application process we come up with, they have to prove, whether it be a tax return or some type of, Secretary of State or something, that they're a real organization that's been around for a while, that's been successful in their mission. We gotta really include that in the application process.
Well, perhaps the council, the committee would like to restrict it to people who have a charitable registration with the IRS.
Yeah, I think so,
I think that would be a good idea.
yeah.
And if they're not a 501c3, they
Well,
become one.
there's other 501s for, I think a
Correct,
religious
right.
organization might have a different sub-number, so
Right, a 501.
501 organization. yeah.
Because, Mike, if they've reached that level, they've done good work. What we don't wanna do is choose somebody who's a startup or maybe does it part-time. You want an organization that's gonna make the best use of these dollars. And if we need that paperwork to prove that, we should ask that on the application.
Well, I just have one more question too. Is this gonna be open to allowing those organizations to come up with a proposal? Are we gonna give them any guidelines or anything like that?
Well-
And the other thing, would we require them maybe to match some of this money with other funding they might have from the federal government or other agencies to do this service in West Haven?
So it sounds to me like you guys get to decide those rules. When the mayor and I spoke, we really wanted to leave it up to the organizations to make their proposal on their needs. But certainly you could say that organization's able to commit funding to help the program should let us know, because that's a leverage of funds. That's a force multiplier. It may influence your decision.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we give the committee members until Monday, 5 o'clock, to email me your thoughts on what you want to see in the application. I will put them together, I'll share them with Doug, and Doug will prepare an application that I'll send back out to you for approval. How's that sound? Yes, good.
There's two organizations in the high school. There's one organization that teachers started for kids that can't have food and don't have toothpaste and stuff like that. And there's also one in Bailey School. If the committee could look into that too, check with Neil, because I understand a couple of teachers started an organization there to supply kids that are needy. Some of them don't even take showers in the morning. See if you can help
Yeah,
them.
so, go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, this letter from the council is pretty somewhat specific in paragraph 1, that the fund will support nonprofit West Haven Community Kitchens, food and clothing bank operations to serve the residents. Funding will be made available as sub-grants to West Haven charitable organizations to provide goods and services or invest in infrastructure. So, that's kind of wide open to it being used for food.
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
potentially even labor, I would guess.
One thing I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it's just someone laid out here. If it was me, I'd say it'd have to be a durable good, a walk-in a truck or something like that, so we know that they're spending the money appropriately, because, it's sad to say there is fraud in these organizations as well.
On that point, you should all know that as an Alliance district, every kid in our system gets free breakfast and free lunch every day. Okay? However, that being said, there is a deficiency for hygiene products. We've installed washers and dryers in the schools because some kids have no other way to get their clothes washed. And Pete, I think when we create the application, a phone call to those organizations to fill an application out would be the fairest, best way. So when someone looks back at this, they could say, we did it right and everyone had a fair shot. That'd be my opinion. Go ahead, Mike.
Ken, just real quick, when we do the application, and we suggest that they check one of the areas, a program for elderly services, a program for school-based services, a checkbox for
So one
general
application for
services.
everything, yeah.
One application, but we're gonna divvy the 400,000 into those areas of support.
Put that in your email. Let's do Monday, 5 o'clock, if that's enough time for
Yep.
everybody. Everybody okay with that? Monday, 5 o'clock, give me your thoughts, and I'll put them together and give them to Doug. Any other questions on the last resolution for the food bank support fund? Anybody? Okay, let's move on to the architectural RFP, it should be RFQ responses, not RFP, my apologies. RFQ responses. Anybody have any sheets they want to share with me for scoring? Anybody do the scoring?
I did.
Yeah, bring those to me here.
Yeah, sure. Does anybody have score sheets down here?
I got 2 sets.
Don't say that, you're on camera. No, Chris has got one set. The one that followed the rules.
I don't learn to read instructions.
All right, so I'm gonna, yeah, it doesn't have to be 100% participation, that's fine. I'm gonna ask for a 5-minute recess. I'm gonna add these up and come back to you. Do you have a motion for a 5-minute recess? Okay, do you have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
See you in 5 minutes. we've got 6 votes for each company. I've got Hoffman at 196, I've got Antonazzi at 231, I've got O'Riordan at 197, I got Ronette at 176, I got Silver at 171, and I got Russell at 194. That leaves Silver and Ronette as the 2 low scores. That leaves us 4 architects. So with that, I would request a motion that we accept, we move on to the proposal stage for Antonazzi, Hoffman, O'Riordan, and Russell. And the goal would be we would accept all 4, keep them on staff and ready to use. Do I have a motion to accept those 4?
Motion to accept Antonazzi, Hoffman, and Biden, and Russell.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Anybody?
Ken, real quick.
Yes.
Do you believe that we'll be able to give business to each one of these 4 to keep the projects moving at the same time?
Which projects?
Well, when we get projects.
Thank you.
When we get projects. I'm really nervous, as you know, about the timing
We got some issues.
of this money and getting the projects completed, or at least to a point where we can issue a contract and encumber the money.
What I like about these 4 architects is you've got small groups and large groups. They have good relationships with subcontractors. Some specialize in working on existing buildings. Others specialize on creating new structures.
Okay.
So I think these 4 are outstanding for us. I think we're lucky to get them. Any other discussion?
Are there reliable contractors, like, as far as meeting deadlines?
So of the 6 that submitted, every one of them has an excellent track record. They act as consultants, they do design work, they do engineering, things like that. I don't see any issue on the 6 or the 4 that we're about to approve, in my opinion.
And Ken, these were pre-qualified as SCROG state contractors? or
No, we have that list as well.
Okay,
What we didn't see in that list was the diversity of architects that we felt we needed. We can rely on that list at any time, and we have engineers in that list that we can go to.
so if we need help in these, because I would imagine all 6 of these firms are gonna be busy, not only with West Haven, but with the state and with every other municipality, so.
Well, but they wouldn't have submitted if they didn't have the ability to produce. So I think if we pass this, I think a note goes out to them saying, well, first thing we ask for pricing, and then we
Right.
evaluate that, and then we bring them on. Okay? Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. With that, we are in new business. Does any member have any new business they'd like to put on the agenda? Anyone? Except you, Dwight. Anybody else? Okay, with that, I've asked for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Have a wonderful night. Don't forget, get me those emails by Monday, 5 o'clock.
Can I just add one thing, Ken?
Yes, sir.
With our MARV requirements now, with purchasing, we've added another layer to the purchasing process, so when you're talking about timing for these projects, any contract over $50,000 now has to be submitted to MARV for their review and comments. They meet once a month, so the timing on contracts, once you guys are moving forward, please just get, pen and double get with me, just to make sure that we can keep it into the right timeframe, because we're gonna add timing after this year if we want.
Can you introduce?
Yeah, about to do that, yeah. So this is Ricky Spryer, he's our purchasing agent. My experience over a 20-year period is that he's the best purchasing agent we've ever had. And I'm not taking away from anybody else. He returns phone calls, he shows up to bid walkthroughs, he's attending this meeting, he's always accessible. I don't think there's a better person that's ever sat in that seat, so I'm very happy that he's here, and thank you very much for working with us. Have a good night, guys.